Hello everyone, today's tutorial is going to be a short one and it's going to be about the brush tool. So, without further ado, let's get started. And if you haven't already, make sure to bookmark Photopea so you can follow along easily with future tutorials. So first off, let's cover some quick shortcuts. So, the shortcut to access the brush tool is the B key, or you could always click the brush icon over here. And to see what basically the brush icon does, simply hold down or dot. That is the very basics of what it does, but that's not all of what it can do. So for some other quick shortcuts, use the bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of the brush. You've got to be careful with this one because if you make the brush too big, it can crash Photopea. So let's just keep the brush as a reasonable size like this, 70. But as you can see, as the brush size gets bigger, it kind of gets a bit jagged. So that's where the first of these three functions comes in, smoothness. So if you put smoothness at a medium setting, all it really does is remove the jagged edges. It doesn't really help you smooth out the brush that much. However, if you bring it all the way up to 100%, it can create almost perfectly straight lines on top of removing almost all of the jaggedness. As you can see, I could create a decent rectangle using 100% smoothness. So that would be something to keep an eye on. So now if we move backwards from this, turn that back to 0, to flow. Flow is when you have the brush, but if you drop it down, you can progressively add layers of paint to it. So if we drop it to a low level here, and then just go over it over and over again, as you can see, it starts out pretty light, but as you keep going over it, it keeps adding more and more layers of paint, creating quite a cool effect. So, to move on to the last one, opacity could be confused with flow, but there is one key difference. If you drop the opacity really low, you can't just go over it again and add another layer of paint. You just keep going and going. It's basically like making a layer invisible, almost, but not quite. It just adds a lighter layer of paint than the colour you've selected usually would. So, now let's move on to some other important things like the blend mode. The blend mode has many different functions, like dissolve, which makes the edges way more jagged, darken, which makes the colour darken, which does not work on this colour of course, because it's literally black, multiply, which seems to make it smoother, colour burn, which doesn't work on a white background, but it will work on an image. Yeah, most of these will not work on a white background, just as a disclaimer. Most of these do require an image to work on. For example, darker colour does work, but lighter colour or linear burn works as well, but it seems like the various light brushes don't work on a white background. So that just about covers it, apart from one thing: the pencil tool and colour replacement. Colour replacement, again, won't really work on a white background, but I think there is something to make it work. So if we just do a side-by-side comparison of the brush tool in normal mode, and then compare that against the pencil tool, as you can see, the pencil tool has a lot lighter of a settings and seems to be a lot more harder and jagged than the brush tool. And then there is the colour replacement. which I believe works by just adding a different colour on top of another colour non-destructively. However, it cannot be displayed on a simple white background. For one final note, if you want some quick access to this, don't do that. Alt and left click is the eyedropper tool, which does this, but Alt and right click and move to the left, and you can freely change the brush size. You can literally make it bigger than the screen, but don't do that, it'll probably crash Photopea. So if we bring it down to a size like this, and then this changes the hardness. Hardness is the last thing that needs to be covered here. Hardness is just simply the strength or like the appearance of the brush. Like low hardness is like this. Let me just make the brush bigger. Low hardness gives the brush a less sharp effect, but high hardness gives the brush very sharp edges, like as you can see here. So that just about covers it. So in this tutorial we covered the brush tool, various shortcuts, blend modes, opacity, flow and smoothness, and how they affect the brush, and the pencil tool. So today's tutorial was a little shorter, but still, if you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe so you can follow along for more tutorials, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.